Over 2 millennia ago, the ancient Mediterranean world witnessed the rise of a singular figure whose immense ambition and unparalleled strategic intellect would permanently alter the trajectory of human civilization. He did not simply participate in the complex political machinery of his era, he completely redefined it to forge an entirely new paradigm of absolute central authority. He was born in the year 100 BC into a highly prestigious patrician family that claimed a direct mythical lineage connecting them to the ancient founders of the city and even to the divine figures of ancient mythology. Despite this incredibly noble ancestral background, his immediate family had lost much of its financial wealth and direct political influence over the preceding generations. Growing up during a period of intense civil unrest and fierce internal conflicts within the Republic, he witnessed firsthand the brutal reality of political power struggles and the dangerous consequences of taking the losing side. As a teenager, he found himself targeted by a ruthless leader because of his family connections, forcing him to flee his home and live in constant hiding in the wilderness. Refusing to surrender his beliefs or divorce his wife at the new ruler's command, he demonstrated an iron will and a stubborn refusal to bow to intimidation, a trait that would define his entire career. He eventually secured a pardon through the intervention of influential relatives, but he wisely chose to leave the city and begin his mandatory service in the eastern provinces. During his time serving in the East, he quickly distinguished himself not just as an ordinary participant, but as a leader of exceptional courage and tactical insight during the siege of a major island city. He was awarded an incredibly prestigious civic crown made of oak leaves, the highest honor given for personally saving the life of a fellow citizen during an intense confrontation. His journey back from the East was interrupted by a legendary encounter when his ship was intercepted by ruthless pirates operating in the dangerous waters of the Aegean Sea. When the pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver for his release, he actually laughed in their faces and insisted they demand 50, stating he was worth far more than they realized. During his nearly 40 days in captivity, he completely dominated the dynamic, treating the dangerous pirates not as his captors, but as his personal subordinates and audience. He read them his poetry, joined in their games, and casually promised that upon his release he would return with a fleet to capture and punish every single one of them. The pirates dismissed his bold threats as the arrogant jokes of a wealthy young nobleman, but they severely underestimated his absolute commitment to his word. The moment the massive ransom was paid, and he was freed, he immediately raised a private naval force, hunted down the pirates, reclaimed his silver, and executed the exact punishment he had promised. Returning to the capital city, he recognized that true power required exceptional communication skills. So he traveled to the island of Rhodes to study under the most famous rhetoric teachers of the ancient world. He mastered the art of public speaking, learning how to captivate massive crowds, persuade reluctant senators, and articulate his grand visions with absolute clarity and overwhelming charisma. He began his formal political ascent by accepting a position responsible for managing the city's infrastructure and public entertainment, a role he utilized to its absolute maximum potential. He borrowed unprecedented sums of money to finance spectacular public games, featuring theatrical displays, exotic animals, and grand feasts that mesmerized the common citizens. These extravagant displays achieved exactly what he intended, cementing his immense popularity among the massive population of the lower and middle classes of the capital. However, this strategy also placed him under a crushing mountain of financial debt, forcing him to seek powerful alliances to protect his political future and his personal freedom. Displaying supreme political cunning, he orchestrated the most powerful alliance of his era, secretly joining forces with the wealthiest man in the Republic and its most celebrated military commander. This secretive partnership, later known to historians as the First Triumvirate, allowed these three men to completely bypass the traditional systems and control the fate of the state. Leveraging the immense wealth and military influence of his new partners, he successfully secured the highest elected office in the Republic, granting him sweeping executive powers. During his time in office, he aggressively pushed through massive land reforms to benefit the common people, often ignoring the traditional rules and physically intimidating his political opponents. Knowing that his time in the highest office was temporary and that his enemies would seek revenge, he engineered a highly unusual legal arrangement to protect himself upon his exit. He secured an extended 5-year term as the regional governor of the northern provinces, granting him legal immunity and absolute command over several highly trained legions. This northern assignment was exactly what he needed. It provided the perfect staging ground to launch a massive expansion campaign into the vast uncharted territories of ancient Gaul. He recognized that to achieve ultimate supremacy back home, he needed the unimaginable wealth and the legendary military reputation that could only be won through monumental conquests. His first major test came when a massive confederation of northern tribes attempted a mass migration across the territory he was tasked to protect. He moved his legions with incredible, shocking speed, outmaneuvering the migrating tribes and forcing them into a decisive confrontation that ended their advance completely. Following this initial success, he turned his attention to a powerful leader from across the Great Eastern River, who had established a strong foothold in the region. Through brilliant psychological tactics and superior battlefield positioning, he routed this rival force, pushing them entirely out of the territory and establishing a new border. Year after year, he drove his highly disciplined legions deeper into the dense forests and rough terrain of the north, facing alliances of fiercely independent tribes. He documented every single maneuver, supply issue, and strategic victory in highly detailed written reports that were sent back to the capital to build his legendary public image. His engineering capabilities were just as terrifying as his strategic battlefield maneuvers, demonstrating to the ancient world the absolute superiority of his technological resources. When he needed to cross the massive, fast-flowing Rhine River, his engineers constructed a colossal wooden bridge across the waters in an astonishing span of just 10 days. After crossing the Great River, he marched his legions through the foreign territory simply to demonstrate that there was no place on Earth his forces could not reach. After spending a few weeks displaying his overwhelming power, he marched back across the river and ordered the magnificent bridge dismantled, leaving a permanent psychological mark. Not content with continental Europe, he organized massive transport fleets and launched 2 daring, unprecedented expeditions across the ocean to the mysterious island of Britain. Though he did not establish a permanent settlement there, the mere fact that he had crossed the ocean to unknown lands elevated his status to mythological levels back home. The incredible wealth he extracted from these northern campaigns was funneled directly back to the capital, where he used it to bribe officials, construct grand buildings, and pay off his debts. He ensured that his name was constantly on the lips of the public, funding massive public works projects that reshaped the architecture of the ancient city. However, his unprecedented success triggered a massive, unified resistance movement among the northern tribes, led by a brilliant and highly charismatic local chieftain. This new rival managed to unite the famously divided tribes into a massive coalition, employing brilliant scorched earth tactics to starve the advancing legions of their vital resources. The defining moment of this massive northern campaign occurred at the fortified hilltop city of Alesia, where he managed to trap the charismatic chieftain and his forces inside. Knowing he was heavily outnumbered by potential reinforcements, he ordered his men to construct a massive, complex ring of fortifications entirely surrounding the enemy city. When intelligence arrived that a colossal relief force of hundreds of thousands of tribal warriors was marching to break the siege, he made a decision of absolute genius. He ordered his legions to build a second, larger ring of fortifications facing outward, completely trapping his own army between the besieged city and the arriving reinforcements. In the ensuing confrontation, his forces were attacked simultaneously from the front and the rear, facing overwhelming numerical odds that would have broken any ordinary army. Through his personal leadership, riding across the lines in his distinctive red cloak, he inspired his men to hold the line against the massive, desperate assaults. The tactical superiority of his fortifications and the unbreakable discipline of his legions eventually shattered the massive relief force, leading to a total and absolute victory. The charismatic tribal chieftain formally surrendered, marking the ultimate conclusion of the northern campaigns and bringing vast new territories under complete central control. Back in the capital, the traditional political establishment watched his monumental successes with growing terror, realizing his power now rivaled the entire state apparatus. His former political partner, The celebrated military commander had grown jealous and aligned himself with the traditionalists, setting the stage for a monumental clash. The central authority issued a direct, uncompromising order for him to disband his incredibly loyal legions, resign his regional command, and return to the city as a private citizen. He knew with absolute certainty that returning without his authority and protection would lead to his immediate political destruction, exile, or worse. He marched his most loyal veteran legion to the banks of the Rubicon, a small shallow river that marked the legal boundary between his province and the homeland. Standing at the water's edge, he paused to contemplate the monumental weight of his decision, knowing that crossing the water with his forces meant no turning back. According to historical accounts, he uttered a legendary phrase acknowledging that the final decision had been made, and the consequences were now entirely in the hands of fate. He crossed the shallow river, an action that instantly ignited a massive internal conflict and sent shockwaves of panic throughout the entire ancient world. His advance down the peninsula was executed with shocking lightning speed, capturing key towns and securing critical supply lines before the opposition could even organize. He famously treated the captured towns with unexpected clemency, refusing to punish his opponents, which rapidly won the support of the local populations. The traditional leaders, completely unprepared for the speed of his advance, made the desperate decision to abandon the ancient capital city entirely and flee across the sea to the east. By capturing the capital without a major confrontation, he secured the central treasury and the symbolic heart of the republic, stabilizing his political authority. Before pursuing his main rivals to the east, he brilliantly secured his rear by marching his forces all the way to the western region of Spain in a grueling campaign. In just 27 days, he outmaneuvered and completely dismantled a massive opposing army located there, securing the western territories through sheer logistical genius. Returning from the west, he finally gathered his forces and launched a daring, highly dangerous winter crossing of the sea to confront his ultimate rival in the eastern provinces. Despite being severely outnumbered and facing critical supply shortages, he managed to establish a foothold and initiate a complex game of tactical positioning. The climactic confrontation between the two greatest commanders of the era took place on the dusty plains of Pharsalus, a moment that would decide the fate of the known world. His rival possessed a massive advantage in traditional cavalry, intending to swing around the flank and completely crush the smaller, highly experienced force. Anticipating this exact maneuver, he secretly hid a specialized reserve line of elite infantry behind his own cavalry, instructing them to use their weapons in a highly unconventional manner. When the massive enemy cavalry charged, this hidden reserve launched a devastating counterattack, completely shattering the enemy flank and routing the massive army. Following this catastrophic defeat, his greatest rival fled the continent, seeking refuge in the wealthy ancient kingdom of Egypt, hoping to rebuild his forces there. He pursued his rival relentlessly, arriving in Alexandria with a very small personal guard, only to be presented with a horrific, unexpected outcome upon his arrival. The young rulers of Egypt, hoping to win his favor, had betrayed and eliminated his great rival before he even stepped off his ship onto the harbor docks. Instead of being pleased, he was deeply offended by the dishonorable act, shedding tears for his former friend and partner, and demanding absolute respect for a prominent leader. Finding himself in the middle of a massive succession dispute between the young Egyptian king and his exiled sister, he decided to establish his headquarters in the royal palace. It was here that he experienced one of the most famous encounters in history, when the exiled queen brilliantly smuggled herself into his private quarters. The young queen, incredibly intelligent, highly educated, and fiercely ambitious, presented her case to him, forming an immediate and incredibly powerful partnership. Together, they navigated the treacherous political waters of the ancient kingdom, combining his unmatched military presence with her deep understanding of the local resources. This decision deeply angered the young king's supporters, leading to a massive uprising in the city and a highly dangerous siege where he was trapped inside the royal compound. Facing overwhelming numbers, he was forced to fight desperate defensive engagements through the narrow streets and even burn the harbor fleet to secure his survival. After enduring months of intense pressure and isolation, heavily armed reinforcements finally arrived from the eastern provinces, allowing him to break out of the besieged palace. In a decisive engagement near the Great River, he completely crushed the opposing Egyptian forces, securing the ancient throne for his brilliant new ally. Rather than immediately returning to the capital to solidify his power, he spent crucial months exploring the magnificent southern lands with the newly established queen. They embarked on a luxurious, highly symbolic journey up the Great River, inspecting the vast agricultural wealth and cementing their powerful political and personal union. His extended stay in the south was interrupted by urgent news from the east, where a regional king was rapidly expanding his territory and threatening vital supply lines. He moved his forces with characteristic blinding speed, intercepting the regional threat in a campaign so swift it became legendary in military strategy. The confrontation was decided in an incredibly short span of time, completely destroying the eastern threat and restoring absolute stability to the vital provinces. He summarized this astonishingly rapid campaign in a report back to the capital, using just 3 famous words, highlighting the absolute efficiency of his operations. Returning briefly to the capital, he found the city struggling with severe administrative issues and economic instability caused by his long absences. He quickly implemented a series of rapid, highly effective decrees to stabilize the economy, manage extreme debt, and restore basic order to the turbulent streets. His ultimate goal, however, was the complete eradication of the remaining traditionalist resistance forces, which had gathered massive strength in the northern regions of Africa. He launched yet another massive overseas expedition, transporting his legions across the treacherous sea to engage the deeply entrenched opposition. The decisive confrontation in Africa took place near the coastal city of Thapsus, where his forces faced heavily armored units and massive war elephants. Through superior battlefield discipline and tactical positioning, his veteran legions completely shattered the opposition, forcing the remaining leaders into total surrender. Returning to the capital following this massive victory, he was granted an unprecedented 4 consecutive triumphs, incredibly elaborate celebrations honoring his global successes. The city celebrated for weeks with spectacular parades, massive public feasts, and extravagant displays of the unimaginably vast wealth he had accumulated. He utilized these celebrations to enact massive public generosity, distributing vast sums of currency to his veteran soldiers and the general public, solidifying their absolute loyalty. He also initiated enormous public works projects, planning the construction of new public squares, grand temples, and massive administrative buildings to reshape the city. However, the last remnants of the opposition had managed to flee to the western provinces of Spain, organizing one final massive resistance force against his authority. Once again, he was forced to leave the capital, leading his forces on an incredibly fast march across the continent to crush the final sparks of rebellion. The ultimate confrontation took place at Munda, a struggle so incredibly difficult and closely matched that he later claimed he had to fight not just for victory, but for his actual survival. Through sheer personal willpower and tactical brilliance, he broke the final resistance, returning to the capital as the undisputed, absolute master of the known world. With all opposition completely eliminated, he began an aggressive and incredibly ambitious program of political, social, and structural reforms to modernize the vast state. He dramatically expanded the central administrative body, adding hundreds of new members from the provinces to create a more unified and efficient governing system. Recognizing the critical importance of a stable economy, he implemented strict regulations on debt collection, reorganized the tax systems in the provinces, and minted standardized currency. He also established massive new overseas colonies, providing valuable land for his retiring veterans, and relocating thousands of citizens from the overcrowded capital. One of his most enduring and brilliant reforms was the complete restructuring of the ancient calendar, which had become highly inaccurate and completely misaligned with the seasons. Consulting with the greatest astronomers from the East, he implemented a solar-based system that included a leap year, a system that fundamentally shapes how we track time today. He initiated plans for truly colossal engineering projects, including a massive effort to drain dangerous swamps to create new agricultural land, and the construction of a massive new harbor. He even planned to cut a massive canal through a major geographical isthmus to revolutionize regional trade and naval logistics. In recognition of his unparalleled achievements, The central authority granted him a series of unprecedented, overwhelming honors that elevated him above all other citizens. He was granted the exclusive right to wear the majestic purple garments of a conquering hero at all times, a symbol of ultimate, unyielding authority. He was given a massive gilded chair in the central meeting hall, and a special month of the year was officially renamed in his honor, ensuring his permanent legacy. Coins were minted bearing his exact physical likeness, a practice entirely unheard of for a living person in that society, signaling a shift toward supreme individual power. The ultimate culmination of these incredible honors was his official appointment as the absolute ruler for a term lasting the remainder of his natural life. This extreme concentration of power effectively ended the ancient systems of shared authority, completely centralizing all meaningful decision-making in his hands alone. While his supporters celebrated his efficiency and grand vision, a growing faction of traditionalists viewed these unprecedented honors with deep, burning resentment. They believed his ultimate hidden ambition was to officially declare himself a king, an incredibly toxic concept deeply hated in their cultural history. This profound suspicion was highly amplified during a major public festival, when one of his closest lieutenants publicly attempted to place a royal diadem on his head. Although he publicly refused the crown to the massive applause of the crowd, the traditionalists saw the entire event as a dangerous, calculated test of public opinion. Operating entirely in the shadows, a secret group of highly influential politicians and former allies began to organize an incredibly dangerous, desperate plot to remove him. This secretive group was led by men he had previously pardoned and elevated to high office, making their growing betrayal deeply personal and completely unexpected. The conspirators believed that his removal was the only possible way to restore the traditional balance of power and save the ancient systems from permanent central control. They managed to recruit over 60 high-ranking individuals into their secretive pact, carefully planning the exact location and timing of their drastic intervention. In the days leading up to the scheduled event, the city was allegedly filled with strange, unsettling occurrences and dark, mysterious omens signaling impending doom. Historical accounts report strange lights in the sky, unusual behavior in local wildlife, and deep, unexplainable feelings of anxiety among the general population. A prominent local visionary famously approached him in the busy streets, issuing a stark, chilling warning to be incredibly cautious regarding a specific date in the middle of the month. Despite his usual sharp instincts, he dismissed the warning entirely, displaying a profound overconfidence in his own untouchable status and public popularity. On the very night before the planned event, his own wife experienced terrifying, vivid nightmares depicting the complete collapse of his power and his sudden demise. She pleaded with him frantically the following morning to cancel his appearances and remain safely within the highly guarded walls of his grand residence. Influenced by her deep distress and feeling slightly unwell himself, he initially decided to postpone the scheduled meeting with the central authority. However, one of the leading conspirators, a man he trusted deeply, arrived at his home and expertly manipulated his pride, convincing him that missing the meeting would show weakness. Setting aside his cautious instincts, he agreed to attend the gathering, making his way through the incredibly crowded streets toward the massive public complex. Along the route, a desperate individual thrust a detailed document into his hands, completely outlining the names and the exact plans of the conspirators waiting for him. Believing it to be just another standard petition from the public, he held the life-saving document in his hand but never unrolled it to read the crucial information inside. He arrived at the massive architectural complex, confidently entering the grand hall without his usual protective detail, completely unaware of the trap that had been set. As he took his seat on the prominent gilded chair, the conspirators quickly gathered around him, pretending to present a highly emotional petition regarding an exiled citizen. They used this coordinated distraction to crowd his personal space, effectively cutting off any possible escape routes and isolating him from potential supporters. Suddenly, the signal was given, and the conspirators dropped their pretenses, revealing the sharp implements they had carefully concealed beneath their heavy garments. The sudden, chaotic strike caught him completely by surprise, and he initially attempted to defend himself with incredible ferocity against the overwhelming numbers. He struggled intensely against the coordinated group, demonstrating the same fierce physical determination that had made him a legend on the battlefields. However, amidst the chaos and confusion of the moment, He locked eyes with a young man whom he had treated with the deepest affection, almost like a son. Seeing this incredibly close, trusted friend standing among the group with a raised implement broke his legendary spirit completely and utterly. Realizing the absolute depth of the betrayal, he ceased his struggles entirely, pulling the folds of his garment over his face to maintain his dignity in his final moments. He collapsed at the massive stone base of a grand statue that ironically depicted his greatest former rival, bringing a highly symbolic end to his extraordinary existence. The monumental event sent shockwaves of absolute panic and terror through the massive hall, causing the remaining attendees to flee the complex in total disarray. The group responsible for this historical shift walked into the public squares, announcing a return to older traditions. But instead of celebration, they found a completely silent public that still deeply respected their iconic leader. Rather than bringing balance, this sudden shift created a massive transition period for the entire state. His incredibly loyal supporters and the general public demanded answers, organizing massive gatherings to show their lasting dedication. During the grand public gathering honoring his legacy, his most trusted ally delivered an incredibly powerful speech that completely changed public opinion. By reading his incredibly generous final documents, the ally inspired a massive wave of public support. The public reaction was so overwhelmingly strong that the opposing group had to leave the capital entirely. This massive public response set the stage for a new era of political restructuring that would permanently change the map. In his meticulously prepared final documents, he revealed a brilliant strategic move by naming his young, relatively unknown relative as his primary successor. This highly calculated decision transferred his immense resources and his legendary name to a new generation. This young successor demonstrated incredible political genius, using the legendary name to build a massive foundation of support and unify all remaining political factions. Over the following decades, he would transition the state into a permanent, highly organized global empire. The incredible legacy of his achievements resonated so profoundly that the central authority officially declared him a timeless historical figure. A massive new architectural complex was constructed in the heart of the city, dedicated entirely to his memory. His tactical writings and highly detailed leadership commentaries survived the centuries, becoming essential reading for legendary thinkers and political leaders. Even modern academies continue to study his brilliant use of speed, logistics, and psychological maneuvering. The incredible political restructuring he initiated laid the absolute foundational groundwork for a system that would dominate the known world for centuries. His vision of a highly organized, unified, and centrally administered state completely replaced the older, inefficient models. The massive infrastructural improvements and administrative reforms he designed fundamentally improved the logistical capabilities of the ancient world. From the standardization of currency to the incredible accuracy of the new calendar, his intellectual influence is permanent. The dramatic nature of his sudden exit from power has captivated writers, playwrights, and artists for thousands of years. The story of his rise to ultimate authority remains the definitive historical tale regarding ambition and political strategy. His name transcended his physical existence, evolving into a powerful universal symbol of supreme authority adopted by later massive empires. Rulers in vast eastern territories and powerful northern nations would continue to use variations of his name for centuries. He fundamentally redefined the concept of leadership, proving that absolute political influence requires incredible public communication. He understood the necessity of shaping the narrative, ensuring his achievements were constantly celebrated. His famous leniency toward former rivals showcased a highly sophisticated understanding of political integration. By avoiding unnecessary harshness, he rapidly stabilized massive newly acquired territories, turning opponents into productive participants. He was a man of incredibly complex brilliance, a fierce strategic mind who also championed the economic stability of the common citizens. He was a highly educated intellectual who was equally comfortable enduring the tough conditions of a muddy field camp. His incredible relationship with the brilliant Egyptian queen highlighted his sophisticated understanding of international diplomacy and global resources. Together, they represented a powerful fusion of Western discipline and Eastern administrative wealth. The incredible speed of his decision-making process remains a defining case study in ultimate management. He understood that in moments of extreme historical tension, bold, immediate action is infinitely superior to hesitation. Even his overwhelming confidence contributes significantly to his deeply compelling historical narrative. He operated with the absolute, unshakable belief that his destiny was uniquely protected, a conviction that fueled his monumental rise. The massive geographical boundaries he established remained largely intact for hundreds of years, shaping the cultural development of an entire continent. The cultural impact of his massive presence permanently integrated vast new populations into a broader international system. He effectively replaced a failing political structure with a new, centralized model built on a powerful form of leadership that inspired absolute personal loyalty, providing centuries of stability and growth. His story serves as the ultimate historical pivot point, clearly marking the explosive beginning of the imperial era. Every single political event in that specific region for the next 500 years was a direct consequence of his monumental decisions. The sheer overwhelming volume of his accomplishments in strategy, political reform, literature, and engineering is practically unmatched. He operated with a level of endless energy that allowed him to completely reshape the massive geopolitical landscape. He remains the ultimate archetype of the decisive, brilliant leader who completely bends the rules of history to fit his own massive vision. His life proves that a single individual, armed with unparalleled intellect, can completely alter the destiny of the world. Today, over 2,000 years later, the monumental shadow he cast over human history remains incredibly sharp and completely undeniable. From the months of our calendar to the concepts of supreme leadership, his extraordinary legacy continues to shape the reality we live in today.